Hello, and welcome to All Things Chemical, a podcast produced by Bergeson and Campbell, a Washington, D.C. law firm focusing on chemical law, business, and litigation matters. I'm Lynn Bergeson. This week, I had the pleasure of speaking with my new colleague, Dr. Richard Fehir, a.k.a. Rick, senior chemist and regulatory scientist at Bergeson and Campbell and our consulting affiliate, the ACTA Group. We discussed Rick's career at EPA and how he is now deploying his considerable scientific chops at BNC and ACTA. Rick is a bit unusual in that he has worked for both the Office of Pesticide Programs and the Office of Pollution Prevention and Toxics. This is a very opportune combination for our clients. Now, here's my conversation with Dr. Rick Fehir. Rick, it is wonderful having you in the studio today. I've been looking forward to having this conversation. So for the benefit of our listeners, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and your illustrious career at EPA.
Sure, I can. And I'm also very happy to be here at the firm and at the ACTA Group. So a little bit about myself. I went to graduate school at Michigan State University.
Yay.
Yeah, so go green, go white to all my friends out there, all the listeners. Great place to be. That's where I got my Ph.D. in chemistry. So did a lot of growing up, so to speak, in the McCusker lab. Basically, at that time, it was very difficult to find a job. When you're graduating grad school, you're applying everywhere. You're applying, anywhere you could possibly think of, industry, government, every agency, and I had multiple applications in to industry. I had an application into EPA. I wasn't really expecting to work at EPA, because I was, academics, usually they push you to go to industrial chemistry labs normally. So I got a couple job offers and it was, doing chemistry related work, but it wasn't actually
It's like chemistry adjacent.
Yeah, chemistry adjacent. But the EPA job was actually doing chemistry. So it sort of led me down the path to say, okay, I'm going to accept the EPA position.
Wonderful. So did you grow up in the Michigan area or?
Yeah, I'm a born and bred Michigander, Metro Detroit area. So my baseball teams, Tigers, Lions, football. Now that I live in D.C., my other teams are the Commanders and the Nationals.
All right.
So
that's the appropriate response.
Yeah. Yep.
So it sounds like you weren't born wanting to work for the government, but the opportunity to work for EPA, was it EPA headquarters or EPA, Region 5, which is the Michigan, Illinois, Ohio area?
Yeah, so it was EPA headquarters in D.C., and I actually applied through USA Jobs, which is, for those that work in the government know, it's nearly impossible to navigate the USA Jobs process and actually get a federal employment.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's very difficult. It takes a matter of 4 to 6 months, at least at that time. Hopefully it's improved. I can only hope. But yeah, if you don't have any preference points, things like that, as a person that never worked for the government, it's hard to navigate your name to the top of that certification list. So it's one of those Easter eggs. Yeah.
Got it. Well, what attracted you to, a career in science writ large? I mean, you're an inorganic chemist. So, number one, what's the difference between inorganic and organic chemistry, and what drove you into that side of science?
Yeah. So I think I was always interested in chemistry. High school, I had a good high school chemistry teacher. So, you started thinking about it. Well, then maybe I'll study this in college. And, the professors there were very supportive. And, you're taught organic and inorganic chemistry. I fell in love with my metals,
Really?
my inorganic. Yeah, it was more interesting to me, just the complexes you can make. No offense to my organic chemist friends.
I was just going to say, don't let Rich Hengler hear that.
No. Yeah, no. I've learned a heck of a lot of organic chemistry working at EPA too. So yeah, just it's the bread and butter of some of the chemicals that people register. But my heart goes out to anyone with a metal in their complex.
Well, is it all that different? I mean, I would imagine toxicologically speaking and from a chemical perspective, there's probably many fundamental differences between organics and
Yeah,
inorganics.
just it's I would say just completely different. Every metal has a different reactivity, different
Right.
chemistry. My specialty was chromium and nickel compounds for my graduate thesis, so those were my two favorites uh, going through that process.
Well, those are very important compounds, certainly for our
Yeah.
practice, and there's been an awful lot of EP activity devoted to those two compounds. Were you able to work in those areas when you were at EPA?
Yes. So since I think the title of the position was inorganic chemist, so that also drew my eye when I applied for the position. But
Yeah,
I,
it seemed
I,
kind of perfect, right?
yeah, any new PMN or LVE that contained a metal seemed to come my way. And there's only two of us at the time that had any experience working in inorganic chemistry, so we sort of both shared the load, and for all the chemistry reports for all those chemicals.
So you noted that you had a good teacher in high school.
Hmm.
Was that inspirational for you, or directionally, was that teacher very instrumental in your selection of being an inorganic chemist as a profession?
I think he was instrumental in just pushing me to continue my pursuit of chemistry
Mhm.
in college. And so then I think professors there, when they were teaching both classes, I think I just fell in love with the inorganic chemistry part of it, just a little bit more than the organic chemistry side.
Oh, to
So
have a
yeah,
teacher inspire
yeah,
that strong attraction, kudos to that teacher, and
yeah,
a shout out to all the teachers of the world that
sure.
help inspire their students and push them into, in particular, science careers, which is a kind of a tough sell in high school.
It is. It's hard, because where are you going to work? They almost
Right.
need someone in the fields to come in and talk to them. To say what are your options using this PhD degree in chemistry.
Mhm.
What kind of options can you navigate? Yeah.
I know you have a daughter. It's probably a little too early to be pushing her into STEM activities.
Any chance I get, we talk about science. You have to, I buy her the National Geographic little kits,
Do
so
you
we can
really?
learn.
Oh, how
Yeah. Yeah,
adorable.
she's loves dinosaurs, loves painting. We have some glow in the dark rocks. So we talk about the chemistry of that,
I think
chemistry
that's
of colors.
wonderful.
The 4th of July is coming up, so there's a
Mhm.
lot of metals used in fireworks. So that's everyone should review, their firework chemistry you can be the star of the barbecue party, knowing which metals produce what colors.
Wonderful trivia questions,
Yeah.
right? Well, you have a really distinguished and long 17-year career with EPA. And as I mentioned in my introductory remarks, interestingly, you've been both in the toxics office and the Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention, Office of Pollution Prevention and Toxics, and in EPA's Office of Pesticide Programs. That kind of dual participation at EPA is a little bit, from my perch, unusual. Usually people drop their anchor in one or the other, and you have been in both. So maybe you can tell our listeners a little bit about what you've been up to and how is it that you found your way into both OPPT initially, right, and then shifted to OPP?
Yeah, the initial grab for me in OPPT was that title, that position. I
Mhm.
mean, I've been doing chemistry for multiple years in graduate school. I want to continue using that knowledge,
Sure.
and so it was very obvious to me that was a good choice. But it was, as I was there, mastering the TSCA PMN program, I started thinking about, well, what's leadership like at EPA? And there wasn't a lot of leadership opportunities in the
Mhm.
office. And so if you're a Fed, well, one option that's available to you is to examine other offices, and so I saw a position. My first time I moved was the antimicrobials division in
Mhm.
OPP, where I became a team leader and was mostly for the registration review program.
Mhm.
Uh, and basically all antimicrobial chemicals was in my portfolio on that team. So it was a very, very busy time.
Busy and diverse,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
It's a very busy office, the antimicrobials office at EPA.
But from there, just to continue my leadership path that I was seeking, a position became available in the conventional pesticides office, the health effects division.
Mhm.
So, I applied and was successful in achieving that to become a branch supervisor of a risk assessment branch.
Excellent. probably honed your both managerial skills, overseeing a lot of projects, and also working in the health effects division in the Office of Pesticide Programs is a very interesting, and in my view, a very interesting area of both the law and the science.
Yeah, yeah, definitely great scientific challenges, great people that are there. I had a great
Excellent people,
team
yeah.
that I dearly miss. But the hard part about being in the management team is you do less science,
Right.
but you help and guide the overarching,
Mhm.
chemical issues. But you rely on your rock star staff to, you know, make it happen, so to
Right,
speak. Yeah.
exactly. Well, before you transitioned over to OPP, what kinds of work were you doing in the Office of Pollution Prevention and Toxics?
So the main PMN, LVE
It's
type of work.
pre-manufacturer notices
Yep,
for new
for
chemicals,
new
right?
chemicals. There was a lot of existing chemical work at that time.
Really?
It was a little different. Um, I worked on mercury, lead, cadmium, nanomaterials as well. So yeah, it was the burgeoning
The
project.
nano version of inorganic substances?
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. And were those in we do an awful lot of PMN work here, new chemical review. When you moved over to the Office of Pesticide Programs, did you miss the novelty of new chemicals program?
You hit the nail on the head there. Because working here, I'm starting to see the new technologies that are coming out, and I did really
Right.
miss that because you see that you're at the forefront of industry. What are they developing, and what's critical to them to try to register with a PMN or
Mhm.
LVE to EPA, and seeing that science. So it's great to be part of that again. It's exciting.
I know
Yeah.
some of our clients' innovations are just mind-blowing, and if I were at EPA working in that area, as you did for quite a long while, right?
Yeah.
I would have Is there novelty, though, in the new chemicals area of pesticide programs, too? Were you able to catch a glimpse of that in antimicrobials, for example, or was it largely reviewing and re-registering existing antimicrobials?
Yeah, I think for antimicrobials, it was new or mostly existing
Right.
because there's not too many new active ingredients that are coming out as an
In
antimicrobial
the
pesticide.
antimicrobials area,
Yeah,
in the biological area, there probably is,
yeah.
yeah.
But the conventional side, when they were there's a lot of new AIs that came through when I was there, so those were interesting to see. And there's some
Mhm,
novel processes, how they were used. It's never been registered before, so all the science is completely new. So
mhm.
that's was a great challenge to see that science project, come to fruition.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely. Looking back over your many years at EPA, do you have any standout memories of extraordinary either innovations or science challenges or things that just you tell your daughter about or will be telling her about when she's a little older as just being incredible experiences for you?
Um, we were there when the first quantum dot PMNs came
No
through. Yeah,
kidding.
so it was uh, just amazing to see,
Mhm.
and it made me, when I'm buying a new TV, I had to buy one that had the quantum dots in it that I knew
Right.
that were registered at the EPA. It was such a you know technology at the forefront of where it was at.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's very memorable. Some other projects, the green chemistry program. Maybe we'll talk
Mhm.
about that later, but that's also a very memorable time to be there. Uh, all the great technologies that came through that. Um, I was also able to be I was on a committee for, the American Chemical Society,
Mhm.
the Committee for Environmental Improvement. It was a great opportunity as a member of the EPA to be part of that committee to try
Mhm.
to, forward those goals. So and also to attend all the ACS meetings and go to the meetings and be part of that and
So were
discuss
you
the
kind of a
science.
liaison
Yeah.
with OPPT, ACS, EPA?
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent. Well, are there any significant regulatory initiatives, Rick, that inorganic chemical stakeholders might be especially interested in knowing about either now or might have been really key when you were with OPPT on the inorganic side? To my understanding, given some of the work we do for some of the metal interest in the industry, there seem to be a number of inorganic initiatives with regard to like the risk framework for metals. Might any of our listeners be interested in hearing more about something?
Yeah, definitely. I'm keeping my eye on the cathode active materials space. There's a
Mhm.
recent SNR that came out. that was proposed, increasing basically the restrictions on the use of those chemicals. So I would, you know, all the listeners, please, take a look at your cams, make sure they're not listed in the SNR.
Maybe
Yeah.
for some of our listeners who might not be quite as familiar with the parlance, a cathode active material is what and used for what applications?
It's for battery use. Yeah.
Both automotive and storage
Yeah,
batteries?
but automotive and storage is
Right, not
correct.
the little NiCads that we put in transistor radios.
Yeah. And
Got it.
they're mass producing these chemicals for the battery technology. They're sorely needed too. They're
Absolutely.
absolutely needed, and it's difficult, I would say, to register a new one with the EPA current process. So that's where we
But
could
that could
help.
probably be said for any new chemical,
Yeah,
right?
that's
But maybe
correct.
particularly CAMs.
Yeah, because of all the restrictions based on their use.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So that's a very important. I know we do some work for metal manufacturers and processors. Are there new initiatives underway with regard to redefining kind of the risk framework for metals writ large?
Trying to think of a specific example, but do you have one you were thinking of? I'm trying to remember.
I'm chatting with some of our North American metal clients, and I think there is some movement afoot to just refresh the metals framework
Oh, yeah, yeah.
with a view toward ensuring that, consistent with the administration's commitment to gold standard science, to make sure that the metals framework for registering and assessing risks from metals and inorganics is on par with everything else that's been going on with regard to organic chemistries.
Yeah, no, I think our CAM Science Alliance here is engaging with EPA on that topic, and
Mhm.
I've recently joined to be a part of that, so we're hoping to make some steps in the positive direction
Wonderful.
within that area. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your time at OPPT, where you were a principal reviewer of green chemistry and sustainability projects, and you coordinated green chemistry development with industry, academia, and government stakeholders. Are there any particular technologies that are stand out in your mind as like an exemplar of how that commitment to working with all stakeholders for green chemistry and sustainability was just an excellent example of how that type of commitment has worked well?
Yeah, s just to go back to my quantum dots, so QD
Right.
Vision was a Green Chemistry Challenge Award winner.
No kidding.
Yeah,
No, actually, I did remember that.
yeah,
Yeah, QDB, right.
yeah, QD Vision, I mean, such a great technology, green reaction conditions,
Mhm,
saving a lot of, solvents and energy by the way they make their quantum dots. Was definitely a standout, and for me as an inorganic chemist, it was an easy one to vote for as a winner. Um,
mhm.
and just to build on that, there was another one in 2016. Professor Chirk had catalysis with earth abundant transition metals, using, I think, cobalt, and instead of, very hard, or what we call it, iron or cobalt catalysis, not rare earth, which is expensive and
Right,
yeah,
and rare.
and yeah, definitely rare. Yeah. What else? I had my other example is an industry example. SciTech, they were acquired by Solvay. They had a very interesting improvement to the Bayer process that it converts bauxite to alumina
Mhm.
when they're actually making aluminum. And there's a lot of mineral scale gets deposited on the heat exchangers in this Bayer process. So removing that scale, they usually have to clean it with strong acid like sulfuric acid.
Which are probably fairly aggressive
Yeah.
with regard to the environmental footprint those chemicals leave, right?
Right, and SciTech developed a sodalite scale inhibitor for the Bayer process that, with high molecular weight polymers that really saved a lot of scale buildup and really improved the process that they're using today.
Mhm.
So it's a great examples of academia, industry,
And EPA
and
working
EPA
together.
working
Yeah.
together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's excellent. That's excellent. Well, because you've worked in both kind of sides of the Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention, have you discerned any differences kind of culturally as between OPPT and OPP? I mean, the program offices administer very different statutes, TSCA being the OPPT statute that most of the OPPT staff are tasked with implementing, whereas the Office of Pesticide Programs deals largely with FIFRA and the Pesticide Registration Improvement Act, collecting fees and whatever. But in your mind, is it really one big office, or are there two kind of separate visions?
It's a good question. It is one big office. We're one EPA. I think both offices try to work together wherever they can, but they are sort of operating differently under the laws that they have to operate under. Like the conventional OPP office is data rich. If you have to register a pesticide, they get a lot of
Exactly.
information.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a new chemical, an OPPT, there isn't a lot of information. Whatever is reasonably ascertainable, we can provide, but
Right. There's
that
either
might not be a
supply,
lot.
and there may not be. But then when there are data deficits, as it were, the agency has perfected a lot of different models to assess toxicity and the environmental implications of new chemistries. So in OPP, there tend to be, to your point, Rick, lots more data that are required as part of the registration process for a new active ingredient.
Right.
Did you find that transition working from models and modeled data in OPPT to actually working with actual data in OPP different or interesting, or how did you manage that transition?
It was definitely different. Even if you have data, how do you interpret it?
Exactly.
If you got what kind of lens are you looking at it with? Your
Mhm.
conservative approach, CPA commonly takes the most conservative approach, but is that the correct approach? You know, and coming from OPPT, where we had little data, just based on, some structures, analogs, basic chemistry, we
Mhm.
could make a call, that was maybe not too conservative and get that chemical to market. But with the amount of data in the pesticide program, it's very goes through a lot of peer review groups, which is a good thing. You
Mhm.
get a lot of scientists, a lot of eyes on the data. But I think, we don't always have to go to the most conservative endpoint if the science doesn't justify that. If we have enough data that point to an answer, but this is where it comes in for the interpretation with the OPPT hat on. Okay, this makes sense to me, but if I'm an OPP, I might want hard data that says, "Oh, this is the answer,"
Right,
and
rather
we
than
might not have that.
extrapolating from,
Right,
yeah,
right.
some
So you
other
have to
source.
be confident in your scientific judgment that
Mhm.
all the data, the weight of evidence of everything I've looked at support my whatever my decision may be.
I've often wondered if over the years, especially since 2016, when TSCA was very significantly revised through the Frank R. Lautenberg Chemical Safety for the 21st Century Act. And in 2016, I think EPA OPPT scientists were probably less experienced in risk assessment and risk evaluation than their counterparts in OPP. You were with OPPT when Lautenberg was newly passed, or you must have been starting
I was
right
right there
around
at the
then.
transition, yes. Yeah.
So maybe the juxtaposition between the nascent stage of risk evaluation and risk assessment in OPPT may not be as stark to you as others, but did you learn from your colleagues at OPP who had very sophisticated risk evaluation and risk assessment skill sets derivative of FIFRA? Was there any type of sharing of, lessons learned or skill sets or scientists in the early days of Lautenberg?
I think definitely the OPP colleagues, asked and got as much information as they could about the OPP process and how to
Mhm.
use that and to incorporate into their standard operating procedures because the OPP process was working. And
Very much
yeah,
so.
to your point, I think you're 100% correct. We weren't used to doing those sorts of risk assessments until Lautenberg came around, and I think a lot of it was, well, how do we how are we going to do this?
Right.
Sort of, it takes a while to develop that process and to get everyone to learn what that is, to make it successful.
Well, over the past 10 years, we're coming up to the 10th anniversary of Lautenberg's enactment. I think OPPT has learned an extraordinary amount about perfecting risk assessment, risk evaluation techniques consistent with what the law requires. Is there a lot of interplay between the two offices now, or is it, you either work on OPP and you work on FIFRA, or you work at OPPT and you work on TSCA, and never the twain shall meet?
Uh, it's mostly the latter. Everyone's sort of in their OPP or OPPT silo, but I think if there's certain science expertise that's needed that could be found in OPP, OPPT may ask for assistance, or vice versa, but
Mhm.
depending. Um, Example I could think about is OPP has a lot of experience in assessing cancer data, because we often get that for,
Sure.
new active ingredients. So we could assist OPPT in that area, or they could assist OPPT in that area if
Mhm.
they needed.
Well, in making the transition to the private sector as you have, and you've done so very well, Rick, you seem to very much enjoy working with clients, learning that their issues are, and trying to move them in a direction to having successful commercial applications of their innovations. What do you miss most about EPA?
The people. I miss all the
Yeah,
people. Everyone I work with. They're just remember, everyone at EPA is a hard worker, great scientist. They are trying their best to get all the actions out on time. Um, I feel for them based, a lot of staff were lost recently, with the various programs and,
right.
the new political environment. But, those that have stayed are picking up all the slack, and they're working very hard. They're very dedicated to the mission, and I miss them dearly. Yeah,
Well, I'm sure they miss you,
yeah.
but we have you now.
I end up happy to be here, and I can still see my EPA colleagues at a happy hour, or maybe a holiday party,
Yeah,
things of that nature.
of
Yeah.
course. No, and we are always appreciative of our colleagues at EPA. I've worked with EPA staff for decades, and to a person, EPA people work very hard and are very conscientious. And over the last several years, it's not unusual to get emails from EPA on Sunday afternoon, on Saturday, at 8 o'clock at night. People work. I know that's a function of just the way we all are working differently these days,
Right.
but always admired the work ethic at EPA, the commitment to excellence and getting the job done, which I see in your work, Rick, all the time. So,
I appreciate that.
do you have any advice for product innovators as they embark upon the very strenuous process of having, for example, a new innovation approved by EPA in either area? I know there haven't been a lot of new innovations in pesticides in the antimicrobials division where you work, but you certainly see new innovations in the OPPT industrial chemicals area. Do you have any thoughts for people that might be starting out or into the process already on what they should be looking for with this EPA in either program office?
Yeah, it's not easy to register something new, and I would definitely use our firm, if you don't, or someone to help you, a consultant that knows the
Mhm.
process. I've been at EPA I was there for over 17 years, and now that I'm here at Bergeson and Campbell and the ACTA Group, I've learned a couple new things myself about about the registration process.
Mhm.
So I'm constantly learning from my colleagues here, and I think if you want to increase your success, definitely have someone help you prepare your package. It's critical. You could try to do it yourself. It could really put your new technology years and years behind if you have to start the process over. So
Right,
if the EPA doesn't approve your package,
right.
you
It is
know,
a little quirky for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. So I would definitely get help, and we are here to help you. Definitely, I could put a plug in for us. I know we do excellent work. I've been here over a couple months now, and all the staff here are top notch, and we
Well,
are
we
here.
definitely think so,
Yeah,
but we also are here to help
that's right.
people.
We are here to help. Yeah, we'll help you navigate this process, in the best way that we can.
I've often kind of fantasized an opportunity for having EPA staff kind of embedded in industry programs so that EPA regulators can understand both the opportunities and the very significant challenges the private sector has in launching a new chemistry and having it reviewed and approved by EPA, whether it's in the pesticide office or in the toxics office. I know that isn't possible to have that type of embedded opportunity to be kind of an intern just to understand better the process
Yeah.
and vice versa to have industry sorts embedded at EPA. So we have a better understanding of the challenges, budget challenges, staff shortages, IT issues, you name it, just so everybody has a better shared understanding of the burdens and the challenges that we each have as we embark upon in working through a legally required process. I know that's not going to happen, but to some extent, you've seen both sides of the aisle. Who has the harder job?
Uh, I think well, when you were asking this question, I was picturing we used to have, what's called a crop tour in the conventional pesticide area,
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
very
where
popular.
staff could go out,
Mhm,
they could see how the pesticides are applied,
mhm.
used, handled, and I think that is extremely beneficial.
Yep,
But that, I is also, conducive on budget, and is travel allowed? So I know it's
right.
difficult, sometimes EPA can't travel or they might not have budget, or maybe industry could,
Mhm.
foot that bill, which would be positive. But I think there's less of that in the OPPT program, which I think would be critical to have some sort of mirror program to a crop tour to go into the industry, maybe
It's
for a
a
day
great
or two,
idea.
to see this process because it is critical. There's new technologies that are, would be great to have on market, but it's just not reasonably attainable through the regulatory process
Right.
as it currently stands.
No, it's actually, Rich Engler and I were talking about that the other day because we will always really, celebrate opportunities to have EPA staff and leadership attend plant tours, particularly on some new technology, for example, to demonstrate how the technology has been perfected and how exposures in the workplace are contained and well managed, just to give EPA a glimpse of how a product is made, especially novel technologies where the familiarity with how something might be made is less known to the agency.
Yeah.
So having a comparable program as the crop tour experience that the Office of Pesticide Programs has done for years now,
Yeah.
right?
It's very, very successful.
It's very successful, yeah. That would be great, but it takes time and money.
Yeah.
And institutionally, it's not part of the DNA of OPPT to do that.
Right.
But it's a great idea, Rick.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll try to work on that.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts? I know you miss EPA and your EPA colleagues miss you, but any message you have for them now that you're
Mm.
on the other side of the fence?
Yeah. Just, you know, being outside the EPA, you're working with industry directly, and industry really is 100%. They're trying to be as compliant, to the letter of the law, and they are
Yep.
using us and doing whatever they can to maintain that compliance. So I'm really seeing that, and as an EPA staffer, maybe think about that from that perspective. You're like, okay, I
Right.
have this package to review, I'm reviewing it, but I'm not thinking about, oh, industry is really trying to, do everything in their power to follow the law of the land,
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, that's a great message, and I'm very glad you're here with us now, Rick. We very much enjoyed all your contributions and skill sets, and working on both sides of the OPP and OPPT aisle is a real find, and we're fortunate to have you. So thank you for joining me today in the studio and giving our listeners a glimpse of what you've been doing and what you're doing now.
Yes, thank you, Lynn. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Thanks again to Rick for sharing his insights on TSCA and FIFRA and how he is now deploying his considerable skills with Bergeson and Campbell and the ACTA Group. All Things Chemical is produced by Jackson Bierfeld at Bierfeld Audio, LLC. We will be back again soon to further inform and entertain you about all things chemical. Bye-bye.